And then I go out and I'm watching. I always watch single people in the audience, one at a time. The lights kind of interfere with that because I'd like to be able to see the people at the back, but I can't. So I watch the front people and I see, is this landing? Like, are the lights going on? Because you can tell. And I think the thing that's most similar to what I'm doing in my book tour is stand-up comedy. So you can tell if it's landing, people are nodding and they're not fidgeting and the crowd isn't rustling, like they're all focused, and some of them are looking like this. And now and then you see someone who's kind of nodding off, and if there's a lot of them, that's a problem. But if it's one guy, you don't look at him, look at someone else. You know, maybe he had a bad day. You don't take that personally. And then the crowd, you said, informs you. And inform is really an interesting term. Information. So now you're looking at the crowd and you're looking at their eyes in particular and their face. And their eyes tell you what they're focused on, so what they think is important. And their face tells you how they're reacting. And then you glance around the crowd and then you get a sense of the whole crowd and you map that onto your body. And that gives rise to a set of intuitions that allows you to communicate, because otherwise you couldn't communicate. And that's listening, although you're doing it with your eyes, but you're still listening. And that does inform this dance. And that's partly also why people love stand-up comedy. That's partly why they like my lectures, is because they don't know what's going to happen, and neither do I. And it could fail at any moment. And so a good comedy...
Have you had lectures that failed spectacularly?
No, but I've certainly had ones... Oh, I certainly have felt that it might.
Right.
Because I'll go out on... My thought tends to be quite tangential because I try to link lots of things together. So then I'll go way out on a limb. It's like I'm addressing this question. Idea. Uh-oh. I'm away from the tree and I don't know how to get back.
Right.
And then sometimes that'll happen mid-lecture and I think, then I get self-conscious, then I forget everything I'm talking about, and that can be real awkward.
Yeah.
But luckily, generally so far, knock wood, if I pause, I can recreate the argument and then I can figure out where I was headed. And then I can think, oh yes, that's why I made that point. And then I can go back. And people like that. You know, one of the things comedians often do is they'll tell a joke early in the set, and then quite a bit later in the set, they'll reintroduce the joke.
It's a callback.
Callback. Yeah, I do callbacks all the time in my lectures. Yeah, and people love that. Because well, people love that because it shows them that they've followed along and that we're in the same place.
Right.
And they love that. They love that. And it's just as satisfying as a punchline.
Yes.
And it is a punchline in some sense. It's like, all this is related to this. They go, click.
Yeah.
Fun. You can see lights go on all the time in the crowd. It's such fun.
Yeah, people love that.
Yeah, well, and no wonder. It puts them in the zone. So here's a cool thing. Vygotsky, Russian psychologist, studied the acquisition of language in children. So he thought, how do children learn to speak? Because no one teaches them. They just learn. It's a weird thing. Even very intellectually impaired human beings learn to talk. It's really deeply embedded in us. So he looked at how parents talk to their children while they were developing language, and he found that parents talk to children at a level that slightly exceeds their current level of comprehension. And they do that without knowing they're doing it. And so then you think, well, what are you doing? You think what you're doing. You've got the child and he knows some things, but he doesn't know enough. But you don't want to punish him and exclude him because he doesn't know enough, but you don't want to leave him undeveloped. So you speak to him so he almost catches on. And that way he gets something, but there's a horizon, right? And the horizon keeps moving and moving. And so the child's right at that edge. That, Vygotsky called that the zone of proximal development. That's the zone. That's the term. So when you're in the zone, which you love to be in, and you know when you're in it, and so does the audience, so does everybody, they're in the zone, man. Athletes are in the zone. Everyone's like, oh my God, they're in the zone. Isn't that cool? It's like, yeah, it's the precondition for cool. It's like everything.
I think what's going on with comedy, at least I can speak to that. I've never really done any lectures, but with comedy, what's happening is it's kind of a mass hypnosis, and the audience is trusting you with their thoughts. If your thoughts are clean enough, meaning if they're precise enough that someone can follow you with wonder, like not knowing where you're going with it. It can't be too obvious. One of the worst things a comic can do is have too many words to set up a premise and to set up a punchline, because then it allows the person to formulate their own punchline. And oftentimes they come to the same punchline.
A little sooner.
Right, because if a person is going to write, if the person's going to use too many words to describe something, oftentimes they're unskilled. Right? So their punchline will also be obvious. And it's a real problem. But that same punchline, even though it's obvious, would be effective if you hit it with an economy of words.
So that wonder is really an interesting thing. So most of the things around us we don't attend to. And that's because there's an infinite number of things around us. Well, except maybe if we're on psychedelics, in which case we attend to everything.
Everything all
and
at
that's,
once.
Yeah, and that's too much.
Yeah.
And everyone says, oh, that was too much. It's like, yeah, that is literally the definition of too much. And we know why.
I never feel like it's too much.
Well, that's good. Never?
No, I feel like I can't handle it at the moment.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not even that I can't handle it. I can't categorize everything.
Right.
Like it's overwhelming in its possibilities.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I love the most about psychedelics is that it informs me of that just by existing. It informs me that all of my notions of reality itself are bullshit. They're all bullshit. And I live in this sort of confined, this restrained, narrow, carved pathway world, because that's where I live all the time. But then
sufficient.
And then but then you have a psychedelic experience, and it just boom.
So
all that's gone.
That wonder that you described, that's like a fractional psychedelic experience. So you say, well, they entrust you with their wonder. It's like, yes, they do.
Yeah.
So when we're sitting in this room, most of the things that are going on around us, we're not attending to. So basically, we perceive them as equivalent to zero. So that's kind of interesting, because everything around us is infinitely remarkable. And yet we perceive everything as if it's zero. Now, the reason we do that is so that we can use our limited attention on a few things.
Yes.
So it's necessary, but it's also blinding. Now, when you start to wonder about something, what you're actually doing when you wonder about it is freeing your perception from the constraints of memory. And that's a place of dancing. It's a place where memory itself is updated. And if you trust someone and you express that sense of wonder in the confines of that trust, then you are in fact participating in the process that reveals the underlying complexity of the world to you, and then does literally inform you.